My name is Sheila Corona. Welcome to Sassy Seer Sheila and New Light Streaming Love, as this will be seen on both channels. Um, this is another Jason Gray writing, but as if you've been following me, you will notice that yesterday, after I was finished recording the Meta Keys, I recorded, I believe it was four very personal writings from Jason. And he has contacted me and asked me to do three more, which I'm happy to do. I had not seen them as yet. And then a fourth one that I did see, but I knew immediately would join these today. So, without further ado, this is The Boy Beside the River by Jason Gray. The transmission date of this was 5/25/2026. On a beautiful autumn day in 1974, beneath the enormous prairie sky of hashtag Saskatoon, I opened my eyes once again to the world, the city of bridges, a place where steel crossed water and where the great South Saskatchewan River moved endlessly through the center of the land like an ancient vein carrying memory itself. Long before I understood the complexity of life, before I knew heartbreak, regret, uncertainty, or the quiet grief of growing older, that river was already there, watching, flowing, remembering. I sometimes wonder now if certain places imprint themselves upon us before we are even capable of understanding what they are doing. Some landscapes do not simply surround childhood, they become part of it. I feel like that's true. They wire themselves into the nervous system of memory so deeply that decades later, one scent, one season, one piece of music, or one line from a forgotten book can suddenly pull the entire world back into existence again. For me, that place was Saskatoon. And somewhere inside those early years, without fully realizing it, I was already beginning to absorb the quiet northern melancholy that would one day live inside my writing. By 1983, I was 9 years old and already becoming far too familiar with starting over. Once again, I was the new kid. Once again, I had to say goodbye to friends I had barely had enough time to truly keep. Wow. Okay, puzzle piece. I'm noticing something here. Myself and my housemate, Lisa, and several others whom I am familiar with that I would call return carriers were also rather nomadic, not of their own doing, but as children. So that's a synchronicity one cannot unnotice. So that's quite interesting. At 9 years old, I was already beginning to lose track of the moves, the schools, the transitions, the strange cycle of building connections, only to watch them disappear again. Oh gosh, yes. There is a certain kind of loneliness that forms in children who move too often. That's absolutely true from my perspective. They learn early not to unpack themselves completely. Part of them remains emotionally packed in boxes, waiting for the next departure. I did not have words for that feeling then, I only felt it. I remember sitting in a classroom at Lawson Heights Elementary School while rain slid down the windows in long silver streaks. Outside, the sky was heavy and gray, the kind of prairie rain that makes the entire world feel quiet and reflective. Inside the classroom, our teacher spoke about Farley Mowat and read his writing aloud to us. At the time, I could not have explained why it affected me. I only remember drifting toward the window while his words moved through the room. There was something different about them. Farley Mowat did not write like a distant academic describing landscapes from safety and comfort. He wrote like a man who had stood in the weather itself, like someone who had listened carefully to silence. His writing carried the smell of pine, river water, campfire smoke, wet earth, and loneliness. Even as a child, I could feel there was something alive inside his words. He wrote about wolves, rivers, isolation, the North, survival, indigenous peoples, forgotten places, and the emotional relationship between human beings and the wilderness around them. What stayed with me most was not simply what he wrote about, it was how he looked at the world. Farley Mowat saw wilderness not as scenery, but as something sacred and alive. He understood that landscapes carry memory, that rivers remember people long after people forget themselves, that modern civilization often destroys the very things that once kept the human soul connected to something honest. I did not know it then, but while I sat there staring through rain-covered classroom glass, part of me was quietly recognizing something that would remain with me for the rest of my life. The observer, the witness. The boy who watched the world carefully because he never fully felt anchored inside it. Outside that classroom existed the very river systems and wilderness that Farley himself had explored and written about. My friends and I spent endless days wandering near those waters. We swam in the South Saskatchewan River during the summer months, climbed muddy riverbanks, explored hidden trails through the woods, and laid across warm sandbars beneath the prairie sun while time itself seemed to disappear. God, those summers felt eternal. The water sparkling under the sunlight, dragonflies skimming across the surface, the sound of distant laughter echoing through the trees, BMX bikes abandoned in the grass while we ran barefoot through the heat of the day, the smell of poplar trees after rain. There was still innocence there, still wonder. Still a version of life untouched by the machinery that adulthood would eventually become. And maybe that is why these memories have been bubbling inside of me for decades now. Because somewhere along the way, I realized I was not simply remembering my childhood, I was grieving it. Grieving the loss of a world that no longer exists, not just physically, but emotionally. Back then, childhood still happened outdoors. It happened beside rivers, inside forests, beneath clouds, under open skies. We disappeared for hours without phones, algorithms, surveillance, notifications, or digital identities following us everywhere we went. We belonged to moments instead of systems. And I think part of me has spent my entire adult life trying to find my way back to that feeling. Not because childhood was perfect, it was not. Even then, instability followed closely behind us. Change always hovered on the horizon of my life like approaching weather. There was always another move coming, another disruption, another goodbye waiting somewhere ahead. Even during the happiest years, I carried a strange underlying awareness that nothing lasted forever. Maybe that is precisely why those memories became so sacred, because they were temporary. I did not know at the time that I was living inside moments that would someday ache inside my chest 40 some years later. Farley Mowat understood something many writers never do. He understood that memory and landscape are tied together, that certain rivers become chapters of your soul, that wilderness does not merely surround us, it forms us. And now, decades later, I can still see that little boy sitting beside the classroom window while rain slid slowly down the glass, listening to Farley Mowat while the prairie sky darkened outside. He had no idea the world would become what it became, no idea how fast life would move, no idea how many people he would lose, no idea how much of himself he would spend the next 40 years searching for. But somewhere inside him, something had already begun. A quiet observer had awakened, a memory keeper, a boy listening to rain, rivers, and words, while the first deep stirrings of a writer slowly began to form beneath the surface of his life. Jason Gray. Well, you really certainly have had a life, very much, it sounds to me, a bit similar to an awful lot of other return carriers, to be honest with you, specifically the moving around and, quite frankly, what my read of what I think is to come. And I'm just so grateful that you stuck around, because you've become very important to me, sir. Now, just beneath this, I'm noticing here too, and I'm going to go ahead and say it, that Jason says this: if anything I have ever written has helped you, there is a way to give back through a monthly subscription. 50% goes to local charities that help the homeless and addicted. And there's a link there. I'm going to put that link in the show more portion of this video, along with, if you have ever felt helped by me, there is a way that you can support me. And it is at the bottom of that show more section, a way that I do receive exchanges, lovely gifts. Mama needs a new pair of glasses. So if you've ever found yourself asking or feeling into that for yourself, there is a way that you can help me with that. I am on a very limited income. This channel is not, nor will it ever be, for profit or monetized at all, actually. And I don't usually do that, but I have some pretty life, not changing, but big expenditures coming up, teeth and glasses that I have to save up for, that you could help me with. So, having said all of that, I will say thank you in advance. I love you all for tuning in. And until we meet again, be well, my friends.